It's nice to be here this afternoon. It's a pleasure actually to be here this afternoon and an honor. I want to start by mentioning that this conference was a lot of work for a lot of people, and I want to acknowledge all of them. The planning committee, in particular, you, Miriam. With Miriam. She is the national leader on higher education and immigration and DACA students, all of it. She's one of the most intelligent, hardworking people I've ever encountered, and I feel so confident that she's leading us in this. I also want to say that my relationship to Dream.us, which is the foundation that supports my students, my DACA students, has been instrumental. I'll talk about that in a minute, and I want to acknowledge Candy Marshall, her staff, Gabby, and also Hayne, who have supported the mission of all of our colleges and universities in supporting our DACA students. So thank you, Candy, and Dream.us. The man of all people, Don, stand up. Don Graham, who is probably the role model for so many Americans about what American philanthropy is. Together with his wife, Amanda Bennett, who is a journalist, they decided that they would support issues of social justice, that they would be kind, they would be benevolent, they would be generous, and thousands of people have been educated because of the generosity of Don. I've been president 17 years. I had fewer wrinkles and I had no gray hair. Now I have a lot of gray hair, but I use loving care. And there I was thinking I was a hot ticket, right? A new president. And one of my dreams was that I was going to really make Eastern Connecticut State University stand out academically. I was an English professor and academic, but that's what I wanted to do. So one of my goals was to make it a top school in U.S. News and World Report, because that was the outside validation I was looking for. And I decided that that was going to be my presidency. So today we ranked #1 in New England. Right? I did that over 17 years. But during that period, when I had that here and I looked in the mirror, I have children, and I said to myself, do I want my children, the day that they bury me in the ground, to say, she made Eastern #1 in U.S. News and World Report? I don't think so, right? I said, that's not what I want my children, who I adore, to remember me for. And that began my my introspection on what it meant to be a woman of color who was going to give forward and make a difference in an institution that was going to be elite, but not elitist. And so in those moments of clarity, I decided that the one thing I would do would be to recruit more minority students at Eastern, and that happened over time, but that the infrastructure had to be changed at Eastern. It was very weak for students of color. And I began that by having a strategic planning exercise in which the faculty was arm in arm with me. I had wonderful faculty, and the faculty who are here, would you raise your hand? Because you can't do this work without the faculty. No, you can't do this work without anybody who's here, an administrator or president. If you don't have your faculty with you, it's going to be harder. My faculty just supports this work in such amazing ways. That's why we've been successful. And so, during that time, we began to look, we got a big grant from Nellie Mae and millions of dollars. We began to look at tutoring, advisement, all of those things in the infrastructure. I'm not going to talk about that today. But I will tell you that, interestingly enough, I got an email from Education Trust, and I had participated in a study of about 400 institutions in the country, and everybody told me not to, because they said, Eastern's going to look really bad, and you're going to embarrass us, all my PR people. I said, I'm going to try it anyway, because we've been working on this. And I got them an email, and I said, oh, this got to be spam. In those days, you called it spam. I said, it's got to be junk mail. This can't be right. So then I called, Jose was there. I called Education Trust. I said, I think you sent me the wrong email. And they said, why? I said, because this says we rank #1 on supporting and graduating Hispanic students, and #7 on supporting and graduating Black students, African American students. And that can't be, because there were 400 And they said, no, you were. And that was what I lived for that moment, and I jumped out of my seat. I went to the faculty, I went to everyone, and the infrastructure was validated by an outside source, which is really important for all of us to know that these things just don't happen. They have to. Yesterday we spent a lot of time talking about infrastructure, and I noticed something that Eastern actually can improve in its infrastructure, even though I believe we have a great infrastructure. So that is what Dream.us saw when they called me and asked me if I would enter into a joint venture with them in which they would send DACA students to Eastern, because they believed that the DACA students needed more than financial assistance, that this was primarily about survival for them in an institution that had to really support them, not just academically, because these are really smart kids, young people, but support the emotional impact that they would be feeling leaving home in from these lockout states and being alone. One of the best examples I have is one of my students, a DACA student, her father was arrested. The minute her father was arrested, she said, I'm packing up and going home, I gotta go home and help you. And we said, hold it, you can't leave the semester. You walk out right now, you're gonna start getting, incompletes and D's and F's. No. So we took up a collection so she could fly home, but we said you could fly home during spring break, which was a week later. And that's what she did, and she was fine, and she came back. But that kind of infrastructure, which goes beyond tutoring and support services and advisement and psychological counseling, is the action that a system can actually, bureaucracy can actually take when a student, a DACA student, or even a non-DACA student is in need, an immigrant student. So I say that because the infrastructure discussion yesterday that we had is really important for us each to do an audit. That's what I recommend. Let's do an audit at our institutions and say, of all of these things that people say are important, how many do we truly have, and how many are really institutionalized? It's not just one person running around from office to office. So the collaboration that I decided to embark on was really important, and that is that I understood that I had a strong infrastructure, but that's Eastern. I stand up here, all these presidents spoke, all of you are there, I'm a drop in the bucket, basically. That's how I look at it. So psychologically, I said, what's next? So now I have Dream.us with me, and that expertise was expertise that we didn't have on Eastern's campus. So they brought the expertise. I didn't have to go around begging people to tell me what the answer was. I could pull out all these experts there that knew all about the DACA laws, they knew all about immigration. I didn't know a tenth of what they knew. So this infrastructure got another layer, which was the expertise of Dream.us. After that infrastructure was in place, we began to advocate for in-state tuition for these students and other advantages that they would have as American students, not citizen students would have. And I knew that Eastern couldn't do this alone. So I called Miriam, because of the President's Alliance, and I said, what do you suggest I might do? And she said, you need to work with UConn. She said, because UConn has a lot of students. Now, even though we're both privates, we're two different tiers on the state university, they're the research one, the communication wasn't that good. She had all of the email addresses, all of the phone numbers, and instantly the students from being both institutions met in Hartford, right? That was the third layer of infrastructure. And now I had the power to act as a president at a statewide level. She also told me, do you know any of the privates? And I know two presidents, the president of Trinity and the president of Common College, two fantastic women. I called them and we activated the private sector to also enter. So there were meetings with the students at the state level. Now you've got Eastern and the other state universities. You've got UConn and the infrastructure at the top. You've got the privates on top of that, all because of the alliance. I would never have gone from Little Eastern's infrastructure to a statewide infrastructure to now building into a national infrastructure. And so the last step in all of this that just happened was that I belong to a system which has 17 institutions. These 17 institutions are a loose federation of institutions in competition with each other, not really a system, although we say we are. and so my boss, who's a very good man, Terrence Chang, was open to the idea that maybe we should all belong to the Alliance, not just Elsa and another institution. And so through Miriam's efforts, the Alliance effort, now all 17 are part of the Alliance. I say that because that takes me out from Eastern's infrastructure to the statewide infrastructure with the privates and publics to the national infrastructure by having all of Connecticut's public institutions belong to the Alliance. Now, yesterday was a very sad moment for me in that last session in which I heard how hard this is going to be, and the only thing that I thought as the speaker, Ali, I thought he was wonderful, said, as he spoke, I said, I got the infrastructure to act. And that's really where I want to leave you with that idea, that as you build the infrastructure, it's not about the support services, mental health, and this and that. Those are okay, those are necessary, but you've got to think of how to build it so that the students have a mechanism to get to influence what's happening at the federal level. Because what happens is our students are studying, they have issues with their families, they have financial issues. It is up to us to facilitate their action. It is our moral responsibility to do that. They can't do it on their own. They don't have the time, they don't have the money, and they don't have the expertise. So in closing, I just want to say that a moment of reflection for what's happened in my lifetime. I'm going to get ready to retire soon, and I'm looking back at all of this and saying, okay, so where are you leaving it? When my DACA students had a rally several years ago, when the nation became quite conservative, I had a moment that I really had to dig deep and say, do I go to this rally? Because we are a blue state, but there are many conservative legislators in my state who will come after me if I act. So I had to think about that. Do I go to that rally? And if I go, do I speak? And so at that moment, I went to the rally, and one of the students handed me the mic. She believed in me. She trusted me. And I took the mic and I spoke. I spoke from my heart. My mother and father, I'm as Phil said, Puerto Rican, so I didn't suffer what you suffered. I was speaking to the people who are here who are immigrants. But I did suffer discrimination because I couldn't speak English. Because my father wasn't educated, they couldn't get jobs. I'm an older woman, so there was no equity issues in employment. So that kind of connection that I have to my students goes very deep for me. And so when I took the mic, I spoke. And then the next day, there was an opinion piece in the paper, in the Hartford Courant, that called me the biggest loser in Connecticut. The biggest loser because I had supported the DACA students. And so they had to do an investigation, because it's a public institution, and he claimed that I was doing things that were illegal. And the Attorney General looked at it, and I wasn't doing it. He said all she did was say that they had rights, that they had human rights, that this was an issue of social justice. She's not going to get fired. And it was a moment that I thought, how many presidents have to cross that line sometimes to decide, how do I support my DACA students, and is it important for me to put my job on the line? And for me at that moment it doesn't have to be for everyone, but I really do think that the next 18 months for all of us will call us to ask that question. How far am I going to go for these students? Because we all talk a good game, but at what point do we say, enough is enough, and I'm going to stand there for my students? And then, wonderful children, I have a son who has a doctorate in law and policy, and I have a daughter who's a doctor. And I was so happy when they got into school, undergraduate, graduate, when they got their degrees, their advanced degrees. And I thought I could never be happier. Last week, I got a call that one of my DACA students was accepted to Harvard Medical School full ride. What I want to share about, she got into Harvard Medical School full ride on her own. That she did it all. But the feeling that I felt was as deep as I felt for my own children.